First of all, I think it's important to take into consideration the impact that hurricane has as an economic shock on the Bahamian economy. I think that the current government is left with very little options. But for us, I think this is a contrast. We remember the FNM telling us that we were foolish to borrow, we were misguided to borrow, and I think that they didn't appreciate the extent climate change have an impact on government expenditure. The Shadow Minister of Finance, Chester Cooper, warned the government not to be so consistent with these government projections and to take into consideration that we have economic vulnerabilities through hurricanes. And so they had their challenges with targets going into the hurricane season. So I think they are left with very little options. I think what is important is a more transparent account of government expenditure. How do they intend to spend the money? But we do realize that there's a larger conversation to be had, because in the last 4 to 5 years, we've had serious catastrophic hurricanes that have an impact on our economic development. I think the challenge for this government is, whilst they pursued an economic policy of managing the deficit, they had no economic growth policy. And so, so there's nothing to supplement the current fiscal challenges, because there's no...
Advancing the future of our country.
Well, I think outside the challenge of the borrowing of the... And I think you're right, and that's the importance of us setting the policy to how we modernize the islands that are impacted, or taking into consideration climate resistance. But I think if you look back at it, there are some microeconomic policies outside Hurricane Dorian. You have a state power company that is immensely challenged. And so this government finds itself in a very difficult situation. And when you look at all sectors of the economy that are impacted. So you have the island of Abaco and Grand Bahama, two major contributors to the revenue intake of the Bahamas that is immensely challenged. And before that, the island of Grand Bahama was challenged. So I think now it's time for the innovation to move this country forward. The challenge, and we've been saying it over and over, is where's the government policy to grow the economy? And I think the economy has been contracting, and you have to take into consideration now that the world economy is contracting. So what is the policy?
You don't begin to discuss, but you implement.
No, but let me say this, and I heard your point on whether or not there was a coherent plan for the Grand Bahamian economy. Now, I think you may recall that the former administration, we had these concessions, the Grand Bahama concessions,
yes,
that stimulated growth, and that was contingent on the only way you're going to get tax exemption if you were to commit to investment. The FNM came into power, and they felt that wasn't the approach that Grand Bahama needed. So we thought that there were persons who were benefactors of government concessions, but they weren't innovating, they weren't investing back into the economy. Outside that, we did a McKinsey report that indicated the challenges that Grand Bahama had. Mm-hmm. We knew that there was no revenue. We knew that the taxes at the Grand Bahama airport were the highest in the region. We know that a key part of the economic development of Grand Bahama is owning the airport, and now knowing that we had to relocate the airport. And we knew that the tourism infrastructure in Grand Bahama was lackluster. So I think what we thought was important is that finding the sectors of the Grand Bahamian economy that needed to be rejuvenated, outside the tourism, in the industrial sector. So there was these...
So what are you saying? You ran out of time?
No,
because if you know all of this, knowing that door leads to the exit and not going through the door to get out...
No, we didn't run out of time. What I'm saying is we had a mechanism in place. When the FNM came in power, they moved the mechanism. The mechanism was to stimulate investment, right? To stimulate investment, and the government of the day decided to go...
So my question then is, if the mechanism was in place and was moved, the only way the mechanism could be moved is by the people who caused it to be moved by putting an FNM government in place. So it was clear that the people in Grand Bahama once sold on what was happening. Why would you vote out a party that's putting in place so much economic development for you?
I think corporate Grand Bahama understood that they were receiving concessions without investment. And we had a policy where if you were receiving taxpayers' concession, you had to invest. And they didn't like that policy, and that's why they had a government that was favorable to helping them remove the policy. So I don't think it's whether or not the Grand Bahamians didn't had a challenge for the policy. I think corporate Grand Bahama had a challenge for the policy.
Grand Bahama could not vote out
for MPs.
Listen, Clint, I mean, people have to do that.
Clint, I understand the PLP would want to come and talk about how their policies were so good and their policies were in place and we're going to do all these great things for Grand Bahama. They've done it before. They were in Grand Bahama. Hold on, you had your opportunity. As a matter of fact, and the PLP had the opportunity many times. And many times they failed. Right now, you know what their policy was? Michelle Reckley. Hold on. Listen. I don't want to make it political. It's a fact. I don't want to make it. Hold on.
You cannot bring up
dissatisfaction with the radio.
That's disingenuous.
You cannot.
You cannot.
I've been to Grand Bahama many times.
I'm not going to allow.
On the ground in Grand Bahama are telling me. If you don't want to admit to it, we can look at the track record.
It's not a mission.
One second, Latrae. This again is why I believe we have this challenge in this country. Here you are representing the DNA, which is supposed to be a new mindset.
Yes, it is.
But you're coming with the same old political rhetoric. Right now, we are at this table.
Let me have the opportunity, right? The chairman of the DNA came inside here. You brought in a private citizen, whether you think it's factual or not, right? You had an opportunity.
What did I say? Hold on.
You had no. Listen to me. You had.
I said that
let me explain. Listen to me. I'm not here to debate the legal parameters of this matter, right?
But it's a fact.
You had an opportunity. You said that the PLP and the FNM cannot put forward a plan for Grand Bahama. Correct. You had an opportunity to tell the Bahamian people what your plan was for Grand Bahama. Instead, you came inside here with your talking points on Michelle Reckley and Shane Gibson, which is fine. If that's your talking point,
Shane Gibson?
You mentioned you can't. You started the show. No. You started the show.
If you want to bring up Shane Gibson,
you started the show.
You want to campaign on Shane Gibson?
No. You started the show. No. We're going to campaign on ideas that move the Bahamas forward. And that's something that you can learn. No. That's something that you can learn from.
Campaign on delivery.
The point I'm saying is this: you have
to learn. We lived the PLP and FNM policies. We're doing the same things over and over again.
You
guys come with your ideas. Listen, gentlemen, they come with their ideas every 5 years. But who do they work for?
Yeah, but let me
Bahamian people. But they don't.
Let me interject. Having to go through so much rhetoric. So my question to each of you in the short time we have left: what is the DNA's plan to get the Bahamas back where it needs to be in the face of issues like climate change and in the face of so many people who are experiencing hardships and being able to live and survive? What is the most tangible thing that the DNA can implement if they were elected on day one?
Well, first of all, Clint, let me tell you, my background is in political science, political theory, and economics. So when we talk about issues facing, and you talk about plans, you can have the best plans in the world, but the people who you elect to carry them out, if they have ulterior motives, once you learn 101 in political sciences, the number one priority of a political party is to be elected. Not for truth, not for honesty, not to bring forth policies. The first thing is to be elected.
Is that what the DNA's focus is?
I'm telling you, elected. This is what I'm trying to tell you. I'm telling you political theory. That's what it is.
You're a political party.
Political parties. I'm telling you now that what you have to do now is look at the parties, the principles in the party, look at their track record, look what they've done in the past, look at who's funding them, which is very important.
But the DNA doesn't have this kind of track record. So what do we look at to measure DNA to say you are different?
Well, look at the people who are in the DNA. The people who are in the DNA left the PLP and the FNM for particular reasons because we realized that the power structure...
Is that enough to vote for a party because the people who are leading the party left because they were disgruntled somewhere else?
Well, I'll tell you it's a start. It's a start because what it says is that the Bahamian people are saying that the PLP and the FNM are not fulfilling the needs of the Bahamian people. From 1997, there has never been a Bahamian government that has been returned to power. That's incredible. That's almost a generation. So was that telling you that there's an element that's missing in terms of delivery to the Bahamian people? And I'm telling you, Clint, that the DNA represents a movement now of Bahamians who are sick and tired of the same old, the promises, the plans, or not even the plans, the ideas. And then when these organizations come to power, it's right back to business as usual. They only remember the Bahamian people on election day, but for all the other days, they remember the people who've given them money to campaign on and funding for their organization.
I want to get him in because we got a minute and a half left.
So we can
what is a single thing the Progressive Liberal Party, if it's re-elected to the government again, can focus to put the Bahamas back on footing?
I think, Clint, talking points don't secure futures. I think the PLP will focus on how do we retool our people, how do we create an education system that give them advance in a new economy. We recognize the world around us changes, and we have to have an education system that reflects that change. I think we realize that climate change is not a PLP, an FNM, or DNA matter. We intend to approach it nonpartisan and bring all stakeholders to the table. What we believe is this. There's new horizon, there's a new economy that could be harnessed. And we think the only way we can harness those new economies is by giving the Bahamian people the skills that is required to embrace new technologies.
And when did the PLP get this revelation?